get me wrong, but just random deliveries of huge amounts of supplies, even, believe it or not, things as simple as water, put a burden on the district to be there to receive them, to store them, to distribute them. By far and away, the most effective thing any entity can give to a school district after a disaster like this is cash. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand very, very initial stages, things like MREs and water and sanitary supplies absolutely are essential, but they do place a burden on the district. And then random school supplies, while welcome, are probably, of all the things that are good things, those are probably the least effective things from an efficiency standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for highlighting that. With the cash that you were receiving, how was it distributed to school districts?
For the things that were just either randomly sent or things where we were, we do have a donation, and sometimes we helped guide them to a district that had those unique needs that matched the gift, or a district of a reasonable size. A very small donation, we tried to pair that up with a small school where it would do the most good. We actually, because of what we learned through Rita and Ike, we were less involved in picking where things went this time than ever before, because we really encouraged that direct district-to-district adoption. Mm-hmm. And so I think most of our schools were adopted by at least one other school. Most of our highly impacted schools were adopted by at least one other school, some within the state and some far outside of the state.
Yeah. The region set up a donations page more generally that was for cash specific. Is that correct?
Yes, and it was actually primarily set up for cash donations, and we did not get a large amount of anything through that. We did get a few, but mostly what we got were calls that we either directed them directly to a district, or we helped them find a district that they could do a one-on-one adoption with.
Okay, thank you. And then how were any expenditures of the various funds here tracked by districts? Or how were expenditures from districts tracked?
That's kind of a district question.
Yeah.
We once we put them in touch with a district, we didn't have any tracking responsibility or role at all. I don't know that we tracked much of anything. For example, if I picked up a load of books that someone had donated when I was in Austin to TEA, I just identified the district they were going to and directly delivered them there.
Okay. Thank you. So then our next question goes back to one that's somewhat familiar, of what supports did your agency provide after hurricane recovery? In this case, I'm asking specifically, what supports did you provide to individual schools?
Everything we've talked about was provided to both, was provided individually. We didn't do much just en masse other than identify needs. But all of the supports were, I would say, delivered on an individual school-to-school basis. Some were common and some were unique, depending on the school needs.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. Our next set of questions here are about how you communicated and coordinated with other state and federal agencies, private and public organizations, and school districts. Could you tell me what other organizations and agencies helped with recovery efforts? I know you've talked about TEA and FEMA and local emergency management. Who else have you worked with?
Oh, okay. Statewide educational organizations, there are lots of specific groups. I mentioned Texas Rural Education Association, Texas Association of Community Schools, Texas Association of Municipal Schools. Churches did a lot of work. I don't know how much we were involved directly with churches, but churches did a ton of work for these districts. The national and local typical emergency response players were all involved. But, some really unique religious, faith-based organizations did a lot of work with these schools. I mean, just incredible work. Mary Ann, Byron, what am I leaving out?
No, I'm thinking you hit most of it. I can't think of any additional ones.
Okay. I've got a series of questions here, and they may be a bit more Mary Ann focused here. For each of these agencies, and we'll walk through them one by one, to what extent did you coordinate with, let's say, TEA to support school districts, and what type of information was shared between you and TEA?
Well, as Dan was saying, at first we had weekly conference calls with TEA, and then Dr. Levette was in constant contact with our commissioner and his staff, asking for information so that they could understand or help them understand the impact that was happening with our schools, because they were making trying to make some rules or things that our districts could do so that it would help them get back in school and keep that information flowing between them.
Mm-hmm. To what extent did you coordinate with FEMA to support school districts, and what type of information was shared between you and FEMA?
Okay, and with FEMA, we also have TEDM, which is the Texas Emergency Management piece of it.
Okay.
They work. Okay, so we would get them. There's actually at TEA a contact that we have there that has been great about trying to share information, trying to, let's say, have said too, lessons learned from other disasters. And so trying to make sure that what the service that our districts are getting here in the region through TEDM and through FEMA is, if there's any problems, they want to know so that they can try to keep that the process flowing.
Mm-hmm. And then, Danny, you mentioned several various school agencies, the Texas Rural Education Association, the Texas Municipal School Association, etc. With those groups, to what extent did you coordinate with the agencies to support school districts, and what information was shared between you and those various agencies?
Directly school needs. They were calling us, they were calling each region because they just wanted to get their resources to the schools that needed them most, and they needed our local knowledge to identify those school districts.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, to what extent did you coordinate with churches and those other faith-based organizations to support school districts, and what type of information was shared between you and various churches?
The organizations, the charitable organizations that contacted us about any kind of donation or need, what I would try to do was to see who they were, where for proximity and logistically wise, who they were close to. Mm-hmm. And I would call that school district and say, I've got this organization and this organization who are wanting to help with your student needs or even community needs sometimes. And then if they're okay, then I would contact that organization back and give them their person there at their district who they could contact, and then they could they could coordinate it together as far as what they could help them do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing all of that. Were you involved with any cross